Good evening. Also tonight, a man's accused of robbing a Warri pharmacy with a syringe. But first, residents in the far north have begun clean-up efforts after Cyclone Ita swept down the Queensland coast over the weekend. Pippa Sheehan begins our team coverage from Cooktown.
In the hours before Ita made landfall, Cooktown, Hopevale and Wudjil were bracing for the worst. The fear in the community palpable.
Pretty concerned. We've got 6 children. We've just told them there's a big storm coming. I don't think they really have any idea how big.
Others took shelter where they could.
Come out the next morning. Structurally wise throughout the park is mainly good. The cabins survived okay in the motel and no roofs off or anything, but just a lot of trees down.
Ita landed as a Category 4, lower than expected. But still a mighty force which wreaked havoc in the region. Power lines fell, roofs were ripped from structures and trees crushed buildings. A Hopevale banana plantation which normally employs more than 30 workers was torn apart, crops ripped to shreds by Ita's force. Initial estimates indicate Ita has delivered a hefty bill of over $1 billion. It could have been far worse.
I think everyone's glad it's all over, but I think it sort of set in yesterday that there was quite a bit to do around the town.
The state government says it's standing strong behind communities in the far north.
In the next 24 to 48 hours, we'll get a handle on what that means and what that looks like. But regardless how big the bill is, regardless how hard the damage will be to repair, we will get it done.
The clean-up has begun in earnest and may last for weeks. Pippa Sheehan, Win News.
Far northern residents and tourists alike bunkered down as Ita arrived over the weekend. Crossing as a Category 1 system, tourist towns were brought to a grinding halt. Isabel Mullen was in Port Douglas as Ita passed over.
Severe tropical cyclone Ita transformed this usually buzzing tourist hub into a ghost town. Arriving in darkness late Friday night, she immediately made her presence known. And by dawn the next day, light revealed a very different city.
It's something I haven't seen here in Port Douglas before. This is the worst I've seen things.
Trees and power lines bore the brunt of strong winds, littering the main street with debris.
There's quite a few scenes like this in town. Big trees, lots of water, softens the ground, down over the power lines. So I think there's 4 areas in town now where there's live wires down.
But emergency crews were quick to contain the damage that was unfolding before them.
This large tree behind me is just one of many to come down as Cyclone Ita blew through Port Douglas. And with debris scattered right across the city, it looks like locals are in for a big couple of days as they clean up their streets.
Business owners shut up shop as Ita rolled through, but they fared well considering. Then, as quickly as she came, she left, and water replaced wind throughout the city.
We really want to impress on people not to take any unnecessary risks. We spend a lot of time saying to people, if it's flooded, forget it.
Port Douglas residents held their heads high despite the damage, and it was the efforts of strangers that locals found the most overwhelming.
The ambulance and everything else what comes with it, it's enormous. Nobody can put a word to it. No way.
Strong winds also brought power lines down out of town on the road from Port Douglas to Mossman. And although residents were contained by flooded roads and fallen trees, they maintained good spirits.
That's nature though, you've got to accept it.
The Captain Cook Highway was closed for a period between Cairns and Port Douglas on Saturday afternoon. But the quick response from emergency service crews saw traffic take to the road by Saturday evening. Isabel Mullen, Win News.
In Cairns, Ita's effects weren't as severe as first feared, but wild winds and heavy downpours still kept emergency services busy as roads were flooded and power lines came down. Matthew Howard continues our coverage.
Ida's arrival to Cairns took longer than anticipated. After making landfall further north, the Category 1 system made its way toward the city, tracking east of Mareeba. Ida's imminent threat forced Cairns Regional Council to activate its cyclone shelters.
We're not sure what we're going to face in the next hours, so we're a bit scared about our car.
Less than 50 showed up, inspiring confidence in authorities that far northerners were prepared.
What's actually happened this time around is people have taken a lot of that advice on board and have gone and found other people to go and stay with and not necessarily had to rely on the resources of centres such as this.
But the Category 1 cyclone made an impact, dumping hundreds of millimetres of rain, cutting roads north, south and west. At Gordon Vale, several drivers were caught out by the fast-flowing Mulgrave River. The driver of this Woolworths truck had to be helped to safety after his rig was swept from the Bruce Highway. Throughout Cairns, trees were felled and power lines cut.
It was a very gusty moment, so the wind and the rain itself was impressive.
The SES was overrun with calls. At Trinity Beach, they battled 100km/h wind gusts to secure loose roofing.
Once it goes flying, it can actually decapitate someone, or seriously maim someone. It's just we need to secure it. We just got to try and find the best options in these sorts of conditions.
Today, floodwaters began to recede from roads, while the banks of local creeks continued to be battered. The Barron was brimming, Crystal Cascades at full force.
We're expecting about the same amount of rain, which is some heavy inundation in our major creek systems. So the Barron River catchment, the Mulgrave River catchment, we're seeing almost record levels of water in there at the moment.
There was relief though, with dozens of Townsville-based Army soldiers arriving to lend a hand.
Our unit's just moved here in support of the SES and at the request of the SES. At this stage we're just assisting them with the loading of sandbags and we're moving to a task in support of them.
Ergon staff were still repairing damaged lines today to restore power to the remaining 500 homes around Cairns left in the dark. Matthew Howard, Win News.
As Cyclone Ita made her way down the coast, southern communities braced for impact. Pippa Sheehan travelled south to speak with residents in Innisfail and the Atherton Tablelands.
South of Cairns, crops on one side of the road were completely flattened. Over the road, it was a different story. Behind walls of upright cane, whole fields were squashed. But Ita was kinder in this area of the far north.
We haven't had a lot of info in from the Tablelands, but we understand that certainly areas like Mareeba and Atherton were fairly well unscathed. They, again, were quite lucky compared to what we were expecting.
Residents in Babinda were quietly celebrating Ita's departure on Sunday.
That's just part of living up here. We get cyclones, but it's always the farming sector that gets worst hit. The farmers are just climbing out of 2 big cyclones in 8 years.
The town suffered badly in Larry and Yarsi. Locals say they were prepared this time.
I don't think our roof will ever come off again. We screwed it down really well after Larry.
Most banana crops in the region escaped untouched. A few lost bunches, nothing compared to the devastation felt further north. The mighty Johnson River in Innisfail was flowing fast as boaties struggled to free their vessels. Cane and other debris pinned their boats against the jetty.
Well, they're sitting a foot out of the water. The water line there, you can see it sitting up on logs.
It took all hands on deck to pull this huge log out. Finally, it came loose. Throughout the Tablelands, it was much the same. In Mareeba, what looked like upright cane hid flattened patches. But the region escaped unharmed after Ita turned her attention further east. Pippa Sheehan, Win News.
Far northerners are again venturing outside after Cyclone Ita paid a quick visit. With the Easter long weekend approaching, Cairns leaders are keen to let the world know they are open for business.
Looking at the Esplanade, you wouldn't know a tropical cyclone had passed through Cairns over the weekend. Shops resumed trading today, and with boats back on the reef, it's very much business as usual.
Cairns is absolutely 100% open for business this morning.
Hotels and businesses say they've experienced little to no setbacks.
All of the people that I've spoken with and engaged with, not one single business has reported any damage.
Ita delayed construction on Lake Street, but the wheels are in motion again this week.
Got rid of any of the loose branches, etc., and cleaned the city beautifully for everybody. And so for Easter and for the holiday period, we're in fantastic shape.
Council has also been quick to organise the free transferal of green waste from residential homes.
Any green waste taken to the dump or to the transfer stations will be received free of charge up until Wednesday.
It will commence again on the 26th of April. A Cairns Open for Business Facebook page has also been launched. With businesses encouraged to show the world it takes more than a cyclone for them to pack up shop. Isabel Mullen, Win News.